Hello and welcome. My name is Grant Sherrod and I'm here to talk a little bit about the Music and Cognition course. What is music and cognition and why are we doing it that way? And then also talking a little bit about the papers and assignments. I did write them as requirements, but I've received some feedback that maybe that wouldn't be desirable by participants, and that's okay with me. I'm flexible. Assignments in class that I would talk about would be the same things and they'd be fun. An example would be that there are two different types of thinking that we have. One is kind of low energy, such as try to tell me when this is moving back and forward, or try not to know when this is moving back and forward. Your mind will do it automatically. Now if I said something such as complete a math problem that is 4,028 times 60, you probably need to slow down, engage some mental resources, and force yourself to solve that problem. There's a little bit of a choice in that. So there's this quick system one thinking and this critical, slow, sort of high resource, high energy type of thinking. So an assignment in that would be something like, let's listen to a song using System 1 and we'll just enjoy it. And then the other aspect would be like, well, let's try to listen to a song using System 2. Or when you go home, if you have an instrument, then try to write a System 1 song. Or try to, one time during the week, to do something that you know requires System 2. These could be assignments or recommendations to do. And we'll do this in class, and it's fun. The class is more casual how I talk, and just try to have fun and ask kids questions that about how we can apply some of these topics to music that they already know, because I try to take the course and then apply it to what is popular and going on, and music in our minds are always going on every single day. So now, why music and cognition versus why is this a music and cognition philosophy class rather than a philosophy of music class? I think will be what I want to talk about right now, and this will be sort of a mini lecture on that, so you can get a flavor of what the class is about. So there's probably the biggest philosopher that's changed things today has been Immanuel Kant. And Kant basically was trying to describe how there are two types of philosophy. There's applied, and then there's pure philosophy. So applied philosophy would be something that people just, we observe from the world, things happen, and then we say that's what that should be. And pure philosophy would be things that are true no matter what. They don't require us observing or experiencing anything, such as 2 plus 2, this is always equal to 4 by the definition. So what he tried to do is look at morality, and not reality in an morality in an applied way, but pure morality is what he was looking for. So since these are definitions that make it true, then we have to look at the definitions of morality. And when we look at that, we find different terms, so we should just really study those terms, which led to people, Immanuel Kant has this sort of, he will have systems, so we'll say there's an analytic way to look at things, and then there's there's the continental, is what the word was. Continental. So the analytic way is going to be a little bit about what I talked about in that System 1 and System 2. Continental, his one example of a continental would be that love is for growth. So the purpose of love is to grow. And that feels okay. And like I hear it and I'm like, yeah, love should be good. Self-love is what he said, should be for growth. Life should be for, love and life should be to make life grow. Like, I agree with that. Like, there's something in me that's like, okay. So these are sort of big, sweeping claims. And these are supposed to register and resonate within us, and they're supposed to talk about the truth with like a capital T. The real truth, the universal truth, which we'll talk about in the Aristotle class, building off of that. And then there's analytic, and analytic is a little bit more of, it's going to be slowing down. You're going to have to break things down. Break things down, you're going to have to collect evidence, specific types of evidence. Collect evidence, and so on and so forth. So a lot of sort of the system too, you have to slow down, it's going to take a lot of energy. It would be something like, why did the Boston Tea Party happen? Most people could say, we didn't want taxes, which sort of a continental answer, like maybe it's true. But if we really slowed down and look and broke it down, like there are entire novels and books written about this one sort of event that happened in American history. And this is more the analytic. And they have different evidence, but it's not exactly what I was showing the distinction. So across the continent in Europe, most people went for these sort of philosophies to give to the true meaning of life and true nature of what is meaningful. And then in Britain, there was more of this analytic tradition, which was slowing down. So they still wanted to use this to then study language. So there is this thing called philosophy of language. And what happened was they would take something such as, let's do something today, such as the tomato. So, or let's say let's just do tomato for right now. And so is a tomato a vegetable or a fruit? Well, depending on its definition, it's going to change. So a tomato based in cooking is it's more savory, so it's going to be considered a vegetable when cooking. And because you'd probably be upset if there was a tomato and fruit salad. That'd be gross. And but to a botanist, a tomato is a fruit. Same with sort of let's say like heavy metal. There's posters of AC/DC, and on their tour, and they'll say AC/DC, heavy metal. And now our standards of heavy metal are bands like Slayer, Lamb of God, and Metallica. Like that's heavy metal. So it changes, and depending on the time period, language will change. So what is heavy metal now? Is AC/DC still heavy metal? No, it's really changed now to classic rock is what we call it. So we have these problems that rose from slowing down, breaking things down to, well, what did the name mean? That created a lot of problems. So basically what happened was there are two camps that split from this, and the philosophy of language shifted to linguistics and then cognition. Because it was too hard to talk about the actual, not too hard, but there's so many problems that of language that it was like, well, let's study the mind instead, because that's where language really is. That's where when I say the word AC/DC, there is a bunch of images that somehow flash through our minds if you know that band. Or if I say Miles Davis or the Beatles, you might know a couple Beatles songs that can play in your head right now. And how does that happen? Does my words somehow trigger this? And then how do you express that music outwards? It's not exactly the same. If I were to say, I am, when I'm trying to play a song, and if I just say I'm sad, does that really express like how sadness feels? That sort of tenseness in the chest, and even then my chest isn't necessarily tense. It's always these metaphors. So we use language to learn about the mind. And similarly to music, we have this sort of break where in school, I think when you're learning an instrument, you do go more through this, because linguistics will focus on the grammar and letters pretty intensely. So there's something called a type token. Type token. So this has 1, 2, 3. Okay, and so it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different types of letters, but then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different tokens, different entries, different letters arranged in this word. So how does that work? How can the same things, these same letters, be connected for an idea? That would be more it. And then in music we have notes. This is an eighth note. This is a quarter note. Accent mark. Oops. That's fine. Accent mark, or different symbols. 16th note symbol. And a lot of students, you will learn this sort of already. When you're playing an instrument, you'll learn a lot of the grammar of music. And however, the cognition part of this is where I like to talk about, because this is more where I lean to. And this is showing more like how I introduce System 1 thinking, System 2 thinking. And this is where the course is going to be, because I find that knowing a lot about how we learn, how to motivate ourselves, is a little bit more supplemental to what's already being taught to students who have an instrument, or students don't have an instrument. This applies to them as well. It'll be more useful in their day-to-day life, because I wanted to make this a little bit more accessible, I should say, and open to anyone who wants to learn about cognition, but it's going to have aspects of music applied to it. And I guess as an example too with music, is music will be this metaphor, because it is a language. So there is this sort of split, because when I play something on the guitar, like let's say Eric Clapton as My Guitar Gently Weeps, which is voted one of the most beautiful guitar songs ever, and when he goes out and play it, you see an entire audience start to cry. Somehow he's communicating an image to people, a sound to people that resonates within them, and then plays these memories, or maybe this song encapsulates different times and achievements in their life, or things that they relate to. And this is a metaphor. It's not exactly what he might have been feeling, but somehow it arose similar conclusions in their mind. And I find this interesting for myself, because I can test it on myself to self-reflect. If I'm playing a guitar and I'm trying to play something really soft, but really maybe it's not feeling right, it's not exactly how I feel, then I keep playing and I figure out, and then I find something that my mind is saying, yeah, like, let's groove on this, and I find that that's a closer representation. I take that as like, this is matching actually what I am feeling right now. So it's a way to learn about our mind and learn how goals are set, because I think music requires a lot of personal motivation, and then it's also has a lot to do with our consciousness, our self-expression, and how we build communities and connections with a lot of people. And that's why I find it the most enjoyable. And you can kind of tell that this was sort of more of a continental answer, which is what I think most people will like music. There's nothing wrong with continental. Like, I have no problem saying music for me is one of the greatest things that I learned. Or music will teach you something. Music will teach you about yourself more than you could teach yourself. These sort of things. I have no problem saying that, and I think it resonates within me, and that it's true. It doesn't mean just, and if I wanted to, we could really go through and break that down, which we kind of will do in the class as well, even in the first class. What does that mean? So I like to preserve this. I try to tell my students that you should take maybe the first 2 or 3 years of playing the instrument. You still want to do your grammar, but really try to develop this sort of continental sort of big picture. You'll see in a video I can post below where Jacob Collier and Herbie Hancock talk about harmony, and before that there's 4 different levels of piano players before that, and the first student is 5 years old and a harmony is just 2 notes that sound good together. And then you see a director or a composer, another classical pianist, and he and Jacob are talking about how the minor 7th operates with the diminished 5th in a lot of these grammar sort of conversations. And then Herbie Hancock, who's played with Miles Davis and has his own solo project, came in, and he's supposed to be the master that he talks to, and really all he said was music is life experience. So there's a little bit of, you know, the simplicity of a child saying like, yeah, like this sounds good, to like a master who has gone through all those phases basically saying, yeah, music is just my life experience now. And he's had a really amazing life. If you want to check out his autobiography called Infinite Possibilities. So with cognition, we want to talk about how we're motivated in music. How does our mind interpret music? How do our emotions translate into sound? Or how do we receive sound and translate it into emotions? And you'll see in the syllabus that this will make a little bit more when we talk about self-reflection, how I already kind of talked about that a little bit. Power of learning music. If you can communicate something to 1 million people that resonate within them, that is a pretty powerful skill to have, especially if it's something honest from within yourself. And then when it comes to things, which I'll come back now, where it's a thesis, a lot of songwriting has types of hidden things that are so complicated inside that I don't really have the right metaphor to say and express, so I have to kind of filter it to exactly what I want to say, which will be like my visible consciousness. And we have this in our subconscious and conscious, and then also like what's inside me, and then what's visible that I put out to other people. And this is what writing should be. It should be, you have something that you care about, that you feel strongly about, that you've been thinking about, that resonates with you, and then you want to analyze and then talk about it here. And students, young kids, I think already do this. Like you can ask them about, right now Fortnite is popular, and they want to talk about it. They will analyze it. They'll slow down. They won't just say it's the greatest game ever. They will collect evidence why it is. They break it down and compare it to different things. They slow down and really focus on one point, or if it's sports, or if it's dance, if it's you know, anything that they're passionate about, they do this. And I think they start off here, which is great, because continental should be this big, sweet, like music will teach you everything you need to know in life, or music is just life experience, as a metaphor. This will be the beginning for your, well, how is that going to mimic my life? How is that going to teach me about my thinking and myself? And this is where you go in. So this should be the beginning, these claims like that, and then you dive in and you can analyze. And I think inspiring this prompts that for me. And the course is supposed to focus on this side, because I feel like most students, if they have an instrument and they're taking lessons, then yeah, they will probably get into the grammar and the more linguistic side of this. So that's a little bit about why I'm doing cognition. We will talk about some music theory and how it's formed in the mind, how when children are born they understand consonants and rhythm almost automatically. And that's pretty powerful. That's kind of an interesting thing to talk about, how that works, why that works, where did that develop, and then how did that turn into music theory as we know it today. What's that based on? How is our human perception of sound, interpretation of sound, originated into these sort of laws? of what we like and maybe what we don't like too. So with the paper topics, I do talk about theses because they do have this hidden invisible tie to them, and it's important, I think, for creativity and songwriting. So an assignment instead of that could be like, hey, maybe go home and try to with your guitar, try to have a feeling and try to put that into how do you think that would sound. Or if it's raining, how would you make your guitar rain? We would use metaphors, or you could even just talk about something that you're interested in here. Like, I think that we should be in a certain type of motivational state, if you want to. If not, I have other many other topics that we can do inside that, but I do like to teach and then show students how they can write a thesis, because having a good thesis in school will help you write a lot more papers and stay organized. It just makes the whole process a lot easier, and if you develop one that you actually like, it should be helpful, but not required. I just find it useful, and it applies to songwriting and how we create music. And we'll talk about different artists' process on that, and most musical process. And then at the end, I have 2 classes that were for presentations. If students do want to come up and talk about things that they liked or something that they were interested in that they want to share to the class, they can. If that's not, if not, then we're going to talk about abnormal music psychology, the nature of, from Oliver Sacks' book, Musicophilia, which we'll talk about. People that can't understand melody but still understand rhythm, what that means in our brains. Is everyone really born to be a musician? Like, it's shown sort of that everyone can be, but there are some things that are in the brain that we've mapped out that show different areas produce more musicality, which is interesting to talk about. Sort of shifts a little bit of the perception on how we say everyone can play music, which is true, but I don't know if everyone is going to necessarily enjoy it, and that's okay. The music doesn't have to be something you enjoy just because you can do it either, or just because you can play it. You can always just listen. That's fine, and it translates into a lot of other skills. So, and then on the very last class, there'll be a time where students can ask me any questions on the class. And then they can ask me any questions about philosophy, and then they can ask me about anything, and I want to know what that's about. So, yeah, the course is pretty fun, and I try to keep it casual with the students. It's not super serious. There is a lot of content, and it might seem confusing, but it's already, all these things are things that we already sort of do but aren't necessarily in control of. Just like when we listen to music, we understand these rhythms, we just need to put names to them. We know what this is even if we didn't have a name for it. We'd be able to see it and draw with it. We wouldn't need necessarily a name to know what it is, and students are pretty good at drawing. Before they know everything about what shading should be, they have a rough idea. So that's also more on the cognition part. So yeah, kind of had Immanuel Kant, how we split, tried to find pure morality, pure philosophy, which turned into this morality. What is pure morality? Well, we got to study the definitions of words, which then led to people saying things with words like love is this, making definitions for words that seem and resonate true. Then there were people that were slowing down and really breaking down, well, what about is an electric guitar? An electric guitar, is there a difference between an electric guitar and an acoustic guitar that you can plug in? How would you know what's electric then? Because you can also play an electric guitar with it not plugged in, and is it still an electric guitar? Things like that. So they get into problems. Is an electric, this would be, is a drum machine a real drummer? But then it's also in the music studio, is it still the same drummer if they have to adjust every single thing that the drummer plays by 1/100th of a second to line up perfectly on the metronome? Is that still the same drummer playing? it sounds better to our minds, but is it the same thing? These kinds of questions would run into problems when we analyze. So this would be this split, which would be like, wow, that's a lot of problems. We should, one camp is talk about cognition, which in music, I don't think we necessarily talk about a lot. I try to tell my friends and my students about it when I teach guitar. And then the linguistics, we do focus a lot on the grammar, how to read music, how to interpret this, how do these different notes translate, what do they mean when arranged on with one another, how do they parallel on different things. So I figured most students had this, and if they didn't play an instrument, they could still come and fully be able to do this with just the understanding of music that they already have. We could do all of the class based on Disney songs if we wanted to. Whatever music they have. So it's I try to make it as open to everybody as possible, and try to see what cool ideas students have. You can check out the next two intro classes that I have for this, and on camera I'm not exactly as casual as I am, still getting used to it. So I hope this clarifies a little bit about the course, some of the requirements, which I don't know, I'm always changed my mind. I thought maybe like this would be something that would be good, maybe that people would want, but I'm still learning. And maybe we'll learn this in this next video I show, where I talk about when we try to do things and then impediments come up or misunderstandings. It's always better just to like learn and then think about something else we could do. And this is what I like to do anyway. So I appreciate the responses, and if there's any more, you can just email, and I'll be happy to answer them as well. So my name is Grant Sherrod. I'm excited to teach the cognition side of music, and students do have questions that I can probably answer a little bit on this, but I do think this is more, this will apply a lot to things that they're going to hear for the rest of their lives, as well as how they can apply this to a lot of other things in their life. I've learned a lot of these concepts from ethics, philosophy of language, and then I'm applying them to music because they still work like that. They apply to what you're interested in, which is fun. And I think when I realized that, then I started learning and analyzing and breaking down a lot more. This was that apply to everything. Philosophy was a continental claim that I just turned into an analytic, but I'm not going to do that right now because that would take too long. So again, check out the next two courses. Forgive my formality if it seems like that, and look forward to any other questions, and I hope this clarifies a little bit what the course is like. So I'm Grant Sherrod. Thank you very much. See you soon.